morning. So I think being comfortable with being uncomfortable, the theme of the morning, is a very good fit to the topic we are talking about now. It's about change. Change is hard. Change is interesting. Change is fascinating. But it's typically a big challenge as well. And we've heard it this morning already. It's like, yeah, we need to change because a lot of organizations are not here anymore. So it's just similar numbers as this morning. Since 2000, 52% of Fortune 500 companies are gone. So, and now the last couple of years, the speed of changing of the environment increased. So what's happening in 20 years? How many of the companies you are working with at the moment will be here? So we need to adjust. We need to build learning organizations to help that. And I have some bad news for you, because about 70% of the change initiatives fail. So the success rate is very low, and it's about the fear. Resistance to change. So how can we make the change very small step that people can take? I think that's very important also in Agile, to have constant change, adapt to the environment. And what we want to do, we'll talk a little bit about SAFe, but we don't talk about SAFe. I think I will not show the big picture this time. What I want to show you is how do we do change with SAFe. So SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework website, comes with a lot of knowledge. And you don't see a change icon on there, but everything what you see on there comes with some change. And what we've done, some of our learnings over the past couple of years, we put that into a roadmap, and that's what we will see afterwards. But the interesting thing before we go to this roadmap, have you heard of John Kotter before? Maybe this morning, right? At least. So he has 8 steps for leading change. It's kind of create the climate for change, create a sense of urgency, starts here, create the guiding coalitions. We need a couple of people working together to do the change. If we have individuals, it's kind of a limitation what you can do. Develop a change vision, then go to the next state, communicate, empower broad-based action, and really sustain the change. And at step 8, incorporate that into the culture. So it's not the first step. We know it's very important, and we need to anchor it in the culture, but we need to show some ways how people can work, how people can change. And this starts with leadership. So that's the SAFe implementation roadmap. And we will not go through all of the parts here, but we'll talk about tipping point, how to train executives and leaders, because they need to understand what's going on. So we go along the way, and we will go until here. That's the heartbeat of SAFe. It's called PI planning, program increment planning. If you know Scrum, we have the iteration. In SAFe, the bigger iteration, that's called the PI. And that's a 2-day event. Very, very fascinating and very energizing. And that's one part where a lot of change is happening. With the outcome, you get first results, because we want to create results as soon as possible. We need to make that visible, that change will become easier. So at the beginning, it's really you push for the change, and after some times, people want to change and want to launch Agile release trains. And that's what we need to create, this kind of pull. That's one of the success factors. So the biggest challenge is, how do we get there? How do we create that sense of urgency? And the easy one, a burning platform. We have a problem. Okay, we can change. We are able to experiment. And by the way, isn't it interesting that if we have traditional projects, we start with them in a traditional way, so we run into a problem, and then we start to change our way of working. Why don't we change that earlier? Start with that, because we know it's helping us, right? So why not starting earlier? So if we have a pain point, easier to start. The second one, and unfortunately we don't see that so often, is proactive leadership. Leadership creates a sense of urgency. And we've just been visiting some of the largest organizations in the world. And we talked with a logistics company. We talked about, what are your biggest competitors? So assume, I'm not mentioning a name, but if you have DHL here in Germany, what's the biggest competitor of a logistics company? Amazon. That was the answer. It's not the other logistics company. We've been to a big aircraft manufacturer. Biggest competitor? Not the other big one. They make a lot of money, they have their market shares. But companies who build drones are a big risk for them. Car manufacturers here in Germany. Biggest competitors, it's not in Japan or whatever, it's Google. And this is proactive leadership, looking ahead, what can happen? But you don't always find that. So, two options, how to get people and create that sense of urgency, get to the tipping point. When we are aware that we need to change, we have leadership support and we need leadership support. Change does not work. Anyone seen a change initiative without leadership support succeeding? If yes, please tell me. I want to learn. But we need a group of change agents. So that's the second step in Kotte's model. We need a strong guiding coalition. An individual cannot drive the change. We need a group of people together. And we need some people who can understand and support and train and advise. And we need some decision makers in there as well. Because if you're doing change on a team level, it's not happening up there. So we need a combination, team and the top executive level. And it's hard to get change done on there. But we need to build a group of change agents. In SAFE, oftentimes they are called SBCs. They are educated in the basics of the framework and how to implement it. But the key point, they need to understand what's going on. We need to train people. And we need to train all the leaders and the other people in the organization. And that's the group of people who can do that internally. So we don't only have external people, we can combine external people with internal people to train in the new way of working. But we typically need a big group, because that's the next step. We need to train executive leaders and managers. And oftentimes you see people stop learning. We've heard it from Pete this morning. It's a learning journey. You are never there. So it's always ongoing. And that's what we need to facilitate, this kind of lifelong learning journey. So, one of my favorite quotes from Edward Deming, it is not enough that managements commit themselves to quality and productivity, they must know what it is they must do. And the responsibility cannot be delegated. So I'm sometimes asking myself how to explain that, and I use newspaper. Anyone still reading paper newspaper? Good. Anyone likes this format? The size? It's really, really annoying because I want to turn the pages and then this is happening, or I'm flying a lot, so I have people beside me spilling the coffee over my stuff, and people behind me like putting the newspapers in my bag. Why do we have this format of newspaper? Any guesses? Cheaper to produce? That was my first thought as well. Traditional way to market? It's always like that. Have you heard that in an organization? Oh yeah, we always did it like that, right? Yeah, we go on with that. In the 1600s, newspapers had the size of paper books. In 1712, government introduced a tax based on the number of pages. We are smart people, right? Smart project managers. What do? Bigger pages, same content, less taxes. makes a lot of sense. So totally fine until here. So we get a lot of regulations, banking industry, automotive, and so on. Makes a lot of sense. But now the interesting point is, in 1855, this tax was discontinued. Did we change the format? Not really. So now translate that to your organization. Any banking people here? No. I didn't have that a lot, no people from banking. Worked with a bank, they have 1,500 policies and standards in place in their organization. And every project needs to follow the rules. Okay, that slows us down, and some of them make a lot of sense, but some of them are maybe not current anymore. Who can change policies and standards? Management. It's not the developer, tester, or whatever who can change that, right? So management needs to change that. And that's why management cannot just delegate that, they need to understand what it is. And they also need to understand the principles behind that, because working with practices, and that's what we hear a lot, safe is some practices, it's the principles behind which are essential. And for that, we need to train the leaders, and we need to get them into a 2-day training. What's the problem with that? Time. How often do we get leaders for 2 days? C-level people, executives. Never. More and more, I hope. We just had that with a very large organization. They built systems, and they said, oh yeah, we have 1 day. 1 day of training, you get 1 day. And people told me, wow, that's amazing. We didn't have that before. 1 day to do training? And we said, nope. We walked away because we know it will not be successful. So they called us back, and we got 2 days. And we need them. We need to talk about the principles which are behind Agile, behind the SAFe framework. People need to understand that, also leaders, because otherwise they cannot lead. And very fascinating, the second day of class, that's when we get a lot of pushback. Oh, this is not working with us, or we need to change that. And that's when you can start working and you see change beginning. So the trainings are organized in a way that it supports change. It talks about principles, because also the leaders need to understand the principles behind, otherwise they cannot lead. The other thing, what we need to do is we need to create a lean agile center of excellence. Especially if you're a large organization, you want to have a group of people working together to drive that change. Experts, decision maker, communication in there, because then you know driving forward, start with a small part of the organization and then go to the next one. We don't want to have an agile organization, right? We want to understand what creates value, what will help us, and use the right tools to do that. So have an agile center of excellence really helps. Have a mission statement for them as well. Know what's in scope and out of scope. But a group of people who can really concentrate and focus on that. And then we have trained the leaders. We have a kind of a common language. And then we go into one of the most fascinating sessions for me. And that's called the Value Stream Identification Workshop. The first step, I'm asking the leaders and the organizations in general, why are we here? What do you want to achieve with the change? Because if we don't have an alignment and understanding, what's the reason for this initiative? It's challenging, right? And I've seen organizations where I came in and said, oh, we don't need to talk about that. It's very clear. Time to market is what we need to address. And I said, okay, interesting, big step forward, but let's just talk a little bit about it. And we started a discussion, and we figured out that everyone had a different understanding what is time to market. And what is time to market for us? One said, oh, we need to go down from 18 months to 6 months. We need to go from 6 weeks to 2 weeks. Totally different understandings. To focus and to create change, we need to have the same goal or a common understanding of what we are doing. So that's the first part. of the value stream workshop. And that's not about teams at that point of time, that's more about the organization. How is value flowing in our organization? We use the lean construct of value streams. It's basically a sequence of steps to deliver value to the customer. So we have a trigger, a request of something, and at the end, we get the money or the value is delivered. And this is something which is ongoing. This is not a project. By the way, we want to go away from projects. We don't have a lot of time to cover that in here. So when you look at that construct, and I will give you an example, the value stream, this is an example of an operational value stream. Mortgage business, so I want to buy a house, I need a loan, and there are a couple of steps going on. That's ongoing for a long time, and then I repay my mortgage, my loan, and pay some interest. That's when the value stream is closed. So there are a lot of steps in here. There are a lot of people involved into the operation of that. Make sense so far? Good. So when we have identified our operational value streams, then we can go to the next step. And we identify what are the systems people in the operational value stream are using, working with. So channels, loan origination systems, credit scoring system, core banking system. What are the systems that are involved? When we have them, we think about who are the people who are creating those systems or creating and maintaining. I really like this morning the part about bringing support and architecture together into a high-performing team. So they solve problems together. So get everything together for one system. And then you see, okay, this is the group of people working on those systems, some in Estonia, credit scoring system. And if you have identified that group of people, you can do the next step and define so-called Agile release trains. That's a term we use in SAFe, which is basically a team of Agile teams. Typically 5 to 12 teams, can scale up 50 to 125 people. So we identify these Agile release trains, and then we pick one to start. Maybe one or two, but typically we start with one. 50 to 125 people, you can create results. You can create outcomes at the end to show, is it working? So we have our value stream, we have our Agile release train identified, and then we can start. We create the implementation plan. We select the value streams and the trains, which typically have leadership support, the ones who have a problem, burning platform, for example. We look at where we have collaborating teams, clear products, and then we create a backlog. What do we need to do to launch this first Agile release train? So then you have your plan, and you work with it in an Agile way. Sometimes it's really like a safe Agile release train to do the change itself. If we have that in place, we have our implementation plan, then we prepare for the launch of this Agile release train. And the preparation is, again, we identify which people have not been trained, because people need to understand what's going on. If they don't know it, they cannot fulfill the role or support the implementation and the change. So we need to train them. We try to remove impediments. We give them the right tools and practices to help them be successful in the transformation, in the change. We also use setting a date as a forcing function. When do you launch the first train? We will never start. You will never be perfectly prepared to start. So at the end, you set the date. This is when we are going to start. And then you create the time box, and you create the maximal preparation you can do in that time frame. We know that we can get better. We will not be perfect. Maybe we will have some changes in the value streams. Maybe we'll have some changes along the way, but we need to start. And then we need to implement a basic scientific principle. PDCA. Plan, do, check, and act or adjust. That's what you want to put in place, because wherever you are, if you do that, you can adjust to the new situation, and you need to do that on a regular cadence. And that's what we want to put in place. We don't want to wait until we are perfect. We want to start and learn as soon as possible. Have the learnings and go on. I will give you some time to read this quote because it's an important one. Change is about new behaviors and skills. If we don't give a guidance how this behavior looks like, how are people supposed to know? So we need to train them. We need to give them some ideas how to do that. And one of the most fascinating things, I was involved in a lot of change initiatives. One of the most fascinating things I've seen, the so-called Art Launch Quick Start. What's happening in there? We have identified our value streams, what we've seen before. We have defined our Agile release train, team of Agile teams, the way we want to start. And then we get everybody together and we train them 2 days in training which is called Leading Safe. Talks about Safe, Kanban, Scrum, but even more important, the principles behind all of these approaches. And this is not about the training and the knowledge of Scrum itself. This is team building. This is preparation. This is working on the resistance. Remember the slide at the beginning? Why do change initiatives fail? Resistance to change. Before we go into the PI planning, and we'll come back to that, we work with the teams already we work with them on the resistance to understand why, to help them understand why are we doing certain things and have the group supporting each other. This training is done with an Agile release train, 50 to 125 people at the same time. So it's not about the knowledge, it's about building a team and speaking a common language. Because a lot of organizations have Scrum teams already. But have you ever seen situations where the Scrum language and the Scrum approach of one team was a little bit different to the other one? What happens if they should work together? Create some misunderstandings, right? So we need to find a common ground, a common language, if we need to work together. If I have one team which is working on a solution, 5 to 9 people, you don't need Safe, you don't need to scale. They can work with that. But if several teams are working together, you want to have a common language. You want to reduce misunderstandings as much as possible. And we want to create alignment in this PI planning. So we prepare 2 days, and then we do a so-called PI planning, PI program increment planning. It's a 2-day event, and we do a high-level plan of the next 3 months. Not a detailed plan, as we do in Scrum iterations. We will still do that, but we want to have a high-level plan, and we want to identify dependencies between the different teams. And the key of this session here is really to create alignment. Maybe a very short exercise. Let's assume we have the job of all getting a rope and we have to pull that flip chart. So that's our job as a group. Now you need to trust me a little bit. Let's think about how you came into the building. Look outside the window for a minute. And now, please close your eyes and point with your hand in the direction of east. There's no right or wrong. East. I want to see some hands, please. Some more hands. Please keep your hands up and open your eyes. And just look around the room. By the way, the specification east was pretty clear. I can write it down. We all know what east is, right? What's happening with the flip chart? Will remain there. So we put a lot of energy walking in a direction, but it's not moving. Have you seen that in projects before? redundancy. People doing similar stuff have different understandings, walking in another direction. So let's assume East for us is here. We are in the same room planning together. This is our objective. Same exercise as before. Everybody's pulling on a rope. What is happening with that? It's moving. And it's moving fast because we have a common understanding, we have a common goal, we are aligned. And that's one of the things which is happening in the PI planning. We want to get alignment. The plan is a secondary outcome, but the key thing is we want to be aligned and walk in the same direction. So maybe a little story how we came up with this. Dean is always telling the story. It was not just sitting in a dark room figuring out how could we get a big group of people together. There was an actual problem. Company was going down for the count. They just had one more chance. They had a short time frame. So they understood that they have to train everybody and then create a plan. So how to train everybody? If you don't have a lot of time, find a big room, get people in there. And then we need to create a plan. How can we deliver the results after 3 or 6 months? Who can plan? Project manager? Executives? Maybe the people who are doing the work can create an excellent plan because they know a lot about what's going on. So let's get the people together, train them together so we speak the same language, part of alignment, and then plan the next step of work together. And we get a commitment. Is there a difference in the commitment if I will tell you, okay, you are going to do that, that's our plan, or I ask what I want to have, you tell me what you will do in that time frame? Why do we have bigger commitment? Mostly when you're telling me what you're going to do, right? So it's an ask, but then the planning is done by the teams, and that's happening in this so-called PI planning. And this was very, very difficult for me to understand when I heard it the first time. And that's what we see all the time. It's 2 days, 100 people in a room. How does that work? How do we get outcomes, results? It's a very, very structured approach where we get people together. We have all stakeholders there face to face. And we know that we are in a distributed environment, so maybe we have face to face to face. So we have video conferencing in place as well. We have management coming in and setting the vision and the mission. And you will not believe if a CEO or CIO is coming in just for 5 minutes to give a talk to the big group, what is happening with that? What is happening with the people? Motivates, right? They're walking out, wow, he took just 5 minutes. Some of the people have never seen the CIO or CEO before. So you try to get the highest level of executive in there. Then you show the way. Okay, where do we want to go? What's the ask? And then we let teams plan. And we do several iterations in that plan. And I've seen so many situations where we've been able to reduce redundancies. Oh, one team has planned something. Oh, we have planned that as well. Maybe we can just reuse what you are doing and we focus on something else. And one of the statements I got from a project manager that was recently in the PI planning, he told me, I was not convinced of that. But I was able to get a decision in 15 minutes in this room because I had all the right people in there, which would have taken me at least 2.5 weeks if we wouldn't have been in the same room. So 15 minutes, 2.5 weeks for a decision. Quite interesting to move forward, right? Other example, an organization, they invested the time to fly all the people from the remote or from some other locations to the central location that everybody was able to plan together. They invested about 100K for travel. You can imagine the CFO's face and some other people's face, right? CFO was in there. He has seen it. He said, okay, we can do that again. It created so much value for them. I'm not saying that you need to do that. Whenever we can, we try to get it for the first PI planning, we try to get all the people together. But even then, if you are really distributed, maybe it makes sense to have it distributed. You need some more infrastructure. But that's a very, very key element of creating alignment, creating a plan which is reliable. And there's some preparation. So that there's a lot of stuff which is going on, and it needs the right infrastructure, and you need to be prepared. But the outcomes are amazing. And never in my life I've seen change happening so fast. 5 days. Are people agile after the 5 days? No. Do they have a starting point? Yes. And then we can work from there. And we have the energy back here to trigger the change. And then we want to create this kind of wins, which we have here. After the first PI planning, we see change, we see wins. People want to do it again. Other organization, first PI planning, CIO was not there. Second one, he has heard about it, he came. Then he talked to the CEO. Third PI planning, CEO was there. Good news, travel fast. And that's how you can move from push change to pull change. Oh, we want to do that as well because it is successful. When we talk about scaling, you scale if you need to scale, but if you can avoid it, you don't scale up, right? But maybe you want to be agile, like a smaller fish. Maybe you need to scale up several fishes together, several teams together. But make sure that you stay lean in the whole process. Because in the new world, it's not the big fish, which is the small fish, it's the fast fish, which is the slow fish. So we need to be fast, we need to change. And the change begins with leadership. We need to change the leadership culture. And there's one very, very important question for you to take away. What can I do? How can I help? Because the change starts with leadership. So I'm here for some questions afterwards, but I don't want to give you some time for lunch and networking back there. Hope it was interesting, and thank you for coming.